All right, I have now started the recording. I want to start off by sharing the screen with the reminders. These are the things that I mentioned to you last week, but I hadn't written down part of it. But I want to make sure that you completed your SOI or is your opinion of the instruction that the university sent out. Make sure your AAPTEL's been completed and you've received an evaluation score of 3 or above in task stream. Review your grades and make sure you've turned in everything. If there's something that you don't have a grade for and you are sure that you turned it in, or you're part of a group and for some reason I didn't have all of the names with grades, make sure you send me an email. Week 15, I've given you the breakdown of the points. And I always try to have 100 or 150 or sometimes 200 points between the A and the A minus and that kind of thing. My intent is not to try to keep you from getting the A. My intent is just that you get the work done. The last day of class for this semester is December the 12th. So everything has to be finished by then, and most of you are in really good shape. There's a couple that I have got some things still outstanding. Make sure your competency folio is set up and your evidences are posted. Dr. Bullis will work with you on that. And then complete the School of Ed dispositions and the competency analysis that's in task stream. So now we will I'll stop sharing this and we'll go to the first group, chapter 20. Yes.
I have a couple questions about a couple of those real quick. Okay. As far as turning in my AAPTEL, I sent it and turned it in yesterday. I haven't gotten any feedback from that yet.
Okay, I checked yesterday afternoon about 4:30 or 5 o'clock.
I sent it right after that.
I didn't have anything, so I haven't checked it today because I've been busy. But I'll get it tonight.
And I've been trying to contact Dr. Bullis for a couple of days. My task stream is not assigned to a reviewer, I think. So I'm not allowed to send for comments.
Okay. Now, the competency folio should be assigned to him.
It's not. The tab at the top that says comments is not even on the screen where it's supposed to be.
Okay.
And even if I go into like the DRF folder, there's a comment button, but it gives me a pop-up that says you are not assigned to a reviewer.
Okay. All right. I will try to get in touch with Dr. Bullis and make sure he's aware of that regarding yours. And I will also tonight review where you've turned in the stuff for the turn it in.
Okay.
So you should get that back from me shortly.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else have a question or comment? Anything? All right. Then let's go to group 1, chapter 28, which is, but can she teach?
Okay. That would be me. Apologize for not being here last week for the game. And
we understood.
We all understand. Thank you to my group. I appreciate you helping out. I'm in the gym, so if the connection gets shady too, I apologize. But
that's okay.
Okay. Bill Bynes, who was a principal at Jose Marti School, was directed by the superintendent to start a bilingual program for incoming kindergarten children. He immediately found a teacher without a lot of searching. He had what he believed to be quite a bit of success of just finding a teacher that he thought was the best fit and extraordinary for the position. She was Spanish speaking. She was comfortable working with children with the express desire to help them, and she had all the requirements. She immediately connected with both parents and children on her own. She worked extra with the students, both during class and on her planning periods, again, unprompted, on her own. And Principal Bynes believed this to be, he thought he was so lucky that she was doing this on her own. How many teachers during their planning periods worked with kids? He was very initially pleased with his choice. During his class visits, he noticed the warmth of the classroom. It had the colors and artifacts from the students' heritage. The students seemed engaged and responsive to Ms. Lopez, and there was mutual respect and admiration that was very evident from all parties. And from all, just from looking in, it looked like everyone's engaged, everyone is comfortable in the class, and that she knew a great deal about her students and their families. One major concern that was showing up on his pop-ins was that he consistently witnessed the conversations turn from English to Spanish quickly on his frequent visits. He was thrilled to have a teacher that the students seemed to respect and engage, and the curriculum prevented him from meeting privately with Ms. Lopez to clarify her method and evaluate her style or criticize her frequent reliance on speaking Spanish. In other words, he just literally said, I gotta believe that this is just an anomaly in each one of his visits, and that it was a coincidence that on each one of his visits that's when it turned from speaking to more Spanish than English. In May, Principal Bynes was surprised when several of the parents emailed, Hispanic-speaking parents emailed and requesting that for the fall class placement that they were not placed in Ms. Lopez's class. He was shocked to learn that the students loved the class and the teacher, but were not learning very much English. Central office was given notice from many parents about the faults of Ms. Lopez's class, as well as a request not to have her teach their children. Eventually, the superintendent notified Principal Bynes that they were going to drop the immersion class and no longer offer it the following year. Later, after meeting with teachers who were receiving students from the bilingual classes, all of them reported that some of the lowest performing and the least ready students were from Ms. Lopez's. He literally was finding all this out on the back end and not trusting his gut initially.
Okay.
Amanda had initially been responsible for the question section, but her son had a program at school tonight and it ran late, so she is trying her best to get here, but I told her that I would, since we've already talked about it, that I would cover it, go over her responses for other questions. The first question that
Jenny, you want me to share it, Jenny?
if you want to, you can.
Okay.
The first question was, why might Ms. Lopez's students be least ready for the next grade? And some things that we came up with were, there could be a lot of things. Obviously, she wasn't doing much immersion. She was simply focusing on what they wanted to learn. She was teaching them everything in Spanish, and they didn't really know their English. She doesn't interact with them using the English that they're going to need to be able to be successful in the workforce, like just such as giving directions. Because a lot of these students that already speak Spanish, they're wanting to be in the bilingual class so that they can kind of learn both, because that English is not something they're getting at home. And her classroom is filled with all these posters of this pretty artwork, and it shows that they're proud of their culture, but it doesn't show what they're learning, like what the academics that they're learning. Just they're focusing on the holidays or certain parts of that culture, or anything else. So she spent too much time making them like her in her class versus making sure that they were learning what they were needing to learn, and but focusing on the actual content. So because of that, it's like they had a good time and they liked school, but they didn't learn anything. They learned, you just come and you pretty much hang out and do Spanish. My child is in first grade, so I would kind of put that as, if he went to kindergarten like this, then he didn't learn how to read or write, but he learned how to go through the line in the cafeteria, that type of thing, which doesn't necessarily help him. Our second question says, should Bill have called Ms. Lopez into his office to discuss the overuse of Spanish? And we say yes. If it's truly bilingual, then you should be 50-50. And yes, he should give her the benefit of the doubt that she is the professional, but he also needs to make sure that she's doing her job and incorporating the English as well as the Spanish. And if it's not something that he does observe directly, then he should follow up and see exactly what's going on. So maybe he could just say, hey, I've noticed this every single time I've been in there, but you do this as well, right? And then that's when she could pull out lesson plans or observations from other people and show that as well. And that's leading into that evaluation. They have the opportunity to discuss and prove. So when you go for your evaluation at the end, most of the time principals will say, well, this is what we've seen, but can you show us where you've done other things as well? Because we're not in there every day. So if you can show us, or you have it documented how you've done this, then that would help us out. And that would be her bringing her artifacts as well as those things. And then our third question says, how do you feel about bilingual education? And in our opinion, what approach to bilingual education represents the best course to follow? And I think this one can be tricky, because if you answer it wrong, then you're going to end up, not necessarily wrong, but you could end up in an HR office really quickly if you answer it in a way that maybe you feel, but not everybody else agrees with you. So it's obviously a great thing, but you have to make sure you're doing it correctly. And by doing it correctly, you are spending that 50-50 amount as to what you need. I think everybody would agree that we are in dire need of ESL teachers to help bridge that gap, maybe especially in high schools, where students maybe are coming to you that are in a high school and they didn't have that chance to kind of bridge that gap, and you're going straight into an academic subject and they're simply just starting out learning the language. So I think we all need that. I think we all also agree that there are several Spanish-speaking individuals as well as other languages as well. So both types of education are beneficial, and it's better the younger you can get this in, the more that they get used to that. So the immersion for both the Spanish speakers to learn English and English speakers to learn Spanish, because a truly bilingual classroom is not going to be full of all ESL students. You're going to want some students where their native language is English and they're trying to learn Spanish as well, so that it'll balance out. So if students can stick with programs throughout the years, then they should become proficient, but it's going to take time, and teachers have to be willing to trust the process and stick with it. And I think you can't do it in kindergarten, skip first grade, and then go back to second grade. I think it has to be something done very consistent throughout the whole process.
Okay. So some comments there that we discussed. Bilingual classes should display respect for the culture and language of children and teach all the necessary and appropriate academics. Students in bilingual classes need to learn skills that will enable them to be successful in the working world. I think, we tend to just focus on the language piece, but also there's a need for the skills and the basis for students of any background to be successful in this 21st century. Bilingual teachers, so what should they focus on? Not get caught up in teaching culture or emphasizing holidays, but emphasizing reading, math, writing, and other academic skills in English every day. Really finding that balance between speaking English and native languages, and then ensuring that they prepare their students to be successful in the next grade. Bill should have found the time to have the conversation with Ms. Lopez about the instructional plan and topics that they should discuss. I think Bill may have, gotten just sort of kind of caught up in the moment to where there was an opportunity to add on this program. And I know we tend to get a little pressed for time when we're dealing with hiring or finding, especially when there's a need. And I've ran across this myself to where you're on a time crunch and you have a position that is available and you need someone to fill that position. In this case, he needed someone that could teach, that was speaking Spanish, but also could teach English. And he had a need. And so I think sometimes we can be so pressed for time to where we sacrifice what we specifically need for necessary just to fulfill the position. And so I think one thing we can really take away here is just we have to be extremely intentional about who we hire or who we can, who we put in these positions in order to meet the actual need for the program, in this case, for the program. So Bill should have had a conversation with Ms. Lopez about the following: the instructional plan that was set forth for Ms. Lopez, that she needed to teach reading, math, writing in the same time as other teachers in the grade. An explanation about the heavy emphasis on culture and the overuse of children's native language, and the expectation that Ms. Lopez must teach the English language so that students can be successful in the next grade level and in the real world. Also, another takeaway is just, I think we talked about this in our last meeting, was about just the walkthroughs, just having those, Mr. Bill being able to actually have those walkthroughs and consistently identifying where when he walked in, they were always speaking in Spanish. So they gave him an opportunity to have a conversation, to have the opportunity to pull aside. So I think that needs to continue. So, continue to observe and be on the lookout for those things. Overall, Bill is irresponsible not to intervene, and it is his responsibility to ensure that the students in his school are receiving appropriate instruction to set them up for success. And again, he did sort of the legwork, but the follow through wasn't there. Follow throughing as in, setting her aside and speaking to her right away. Bilingual education must focus on implementing the curriculum where the bases are taught, and the English language is also taught. It is a disservice to students to only focus on the culture and the natural language, as they will eventually need to learn English to be successful in the real world. And we talked about that a little bit earlier about the skills that they will need, preparing them for outside of the classroom. It is vital that each child learn to speak, read, and write English fluently and with mastery. Successful immersion and bilingual programs teach English, reading, writing, listening, and speaking thoroughly and effectively. And it's coincidence that my boys actually have attended a Spanish immersion school since kindergarten, and it's all the way up kindergarten through, they're in 4th grade now, and their first year it was 50-50. Half of their class was in Spanish and the other half was in English, and now they're being fully immersed in the 4th grade. In their 4th year, they've been fully immersed in the Spanish language. And it's important to find a balance, because there was a point where we were told that they had to consistently continue to read at home, and if not, they may lose their first language. And we focused a lot heavy on reading, but also at the same time, they were building their background knowledge. So they're focusing on English, reading, and writing, and math. So I think Bill, he did miss a couple opportunities to where he can really be intentional with Ms. Lopez, but overall, Ms. Lopez did the job, but I think there was more opportunity that she could have done.
All right. Anybody else have anything to say about this particular case study and the topics of bilingual education? How many of your schools have bilingual education classes? I know we have ESL or English as a second language, or whatever we're calling it nowadays, but how many actual have the bilingual classes? So none of your classes do?
My school district has started it at the elementary level, and Jonathan, it's crazy. My little girl, she's in 1st grade, and she's in a dual language full immersion program, and I'm just blown away and learning so much about the process of gaining a new language. So I'm really passionate about this topic.
I think you all hit on the important points. The fact that the principal was assuming and didn't ask questions. That's one of the biggest takeaways that you should get from this. The principal was assuming that he was just seeing something out of the ordinary and that they were not doing all of the discussion in the Spanish language. But he should, as you pointed out, he should have asked questions. He should have followed up with his instincts that something's not quite right. one of the things I learned a long time ago, and it was always hard for me to do, is when I would think that something wasn't quite right, I hated to bring it up because I thought, well, I may be wrong. But almost every time that I did not bring it up and did not follow up with it, I wound up having an issue that I had to deal with down the road. So trust your instincts more so than you think you should be to start with, because you'll think, well, maybe this is just my opinion and maybe I should give her more of a chance. Well, you probably still need to have the conversation to find out why she's doing what she's doing and how often she's doing it. And you might ask to see lesson plans. When you go into a classroom, there is nothing wrong with asking to see their lesson plans, especially if you see something that doesn't quite feel right. And so I think the principal there lost some opportunities to fix this before he wound up losing the entire program at the end of the year. And it's interesting, the group of parents that were upset over the issue. It was the parents whose children were not learning the English. They wanted their children to be fluent in English because they weren't. And so they were upset over that. So, you have to pay attention to the whole thing. And when something just doesn't feel right and it seems to be happening over and over when you're in the classroom, don't hesitate to ask for an explanation. That teachers should be able to give you an explanation of why they're doing what they're doing, and they should be able to tell you how much of the time they're using Spanish and how much of the time they're using English. So, trust your instincts a lot more than, as you are in the job, you'll get more and more feeling comfortable with trusting your instincts. But initially, you may be a little bit hesitant to do so, but trust them, because a lot of times they'll be right. Anybody else have anything to add to this particular case study? All right, group 2, you had a difference of styles.
I'm going to take that.
Okay.
So I'm going to give the summary and then we're going to talk about the questions together.
Okay.
But basically there was a mandate given from the No Child Left Behind legislation, and the local Board of Ed wanted to implement a new math curriculum for 10th grade. So there's a principal named Sam and a math supervisor named Jean. And so they met about the implementation. Well, Sam, he was very explicit whenever he was when he was discussing the process he wanted for the implementation with Jean. And then after the meeting, Sam did the observations for math instruction, and he noticed that there were some holes in the effectiveness of the implementation. So the kids weren't engaged, the teachers didn't seem to understand the philosophy of the new math curriculum. So he was feeling pressure from the superintendent just because he knew his superintendent so well. And he decided to meet with Jean again. And that's where we start to see that there's a difference in leadership styles. And so they start to clash. So Sam is very authoritative and direct, and he's very structured. And Jean is more collaborative and kind of passive. And in the meeting, we learned that Jean has been there a long time. He's a long-time member of the staff. And Sam is very direct with what he would like. And he told Jean that your style may be too laissez-faire, and that's a problem. And so then he provided Jean with an outline of ideas of how to more effectively make this implementation happen. So Jean reacted to that by just sitting and staring quietly and nodding. And Sam just realized that the success of the math curriculum is going to depend on his next moves as the leader of the school. And so that's the summary.
Okay.
And questions. For the first one, we needed to compare and contrast the leadership styles of Sam and Jean. Does anybody from the group want to do that, or would you like for me to do it?
I'll do it. So like Sarah said before, Jean is more like laid back. He likes to have the teacher's ideas and kind of, here's the information, I want to see what you can do with it. But Sam is very authoritative and very kind of like, it felt like kind of like a micromanager. Like, I am like, this is exactly how it is, this is how you're going to do it, this is the expectation, now I expect you to do it that way. And it was just it was very hard for Sam to see such a different style because they're kind of like complete opposites.
And the second question was, which style is more conducive to getting positive results?
We had kind of talked about it and said, you know, maybe like in the beginning of implementing the program, be more of a Sam where you make sure that they all understand the importance of it, they understand the structure, and like you're kind of, you know, doing more walkthroughs than you normally would to, you know, make sure that they understand exactly what they're supposed to be doing, when they're supposed to be doing it, how they're supposed to grade, and, you know, everything about the program. But then at some point you kind of have to step back and kind of like let the teachers take over, you know, when they feel comfortable, kind of step back and kind of be a Gene and say, okay, now you understand the structure and how everything is supposed to go. Now kind of put your own your teacher's twist on it, your own style, that kind of thing.
The next question was about how does the superintendent's leadership style impact Sam's own leadership style? He knew how his superintendent was, and he knew that the superintendent was putting a lot of trying to think of the right word. He was putting a lot of, you know,
emphasis
on him to make it work. He wanted it, if it didn't work, he knew that the superintendent was going to question his ability as a principal and as a leader of that school. So he felt like he had to do everything in his power to make sure that his supervisor knew how important the success of this math curriculum was. The next question was, analyze the effectiveness of Sam's approach in dealing with Gene.
He was not effective at all. And you can see that throughout the actual case study. He just, you know, it's like a kid, like you're fussing at a kid and they just like, okay, whatever, okay, because they just want you to shut up. He, you know, it says in there that Sam just, you know, Gene, sorry, I keep getting them confused. That Gene just, you can tell he shut down. He just started nodding. He was just agreeing with him. And he was just kind of like, in my mind, I picture as he's just sitting there. I just want this meeting to be over because he's not paying attention to anything he has to say. So.
The next question is, what other approaches could Sam use to gain Gene's commitment to the math program? The big thing we talked about was that he could just have a conversation with Gene about why did he feel like the math curriculum was not doing well? What did he feel like, what strategies could be implemented by the teachers to make a difference with it? Or even he could ask Gene and the teachers to sit down and come up with some different reasons why they think the math curriculum isn't working. So basically just opening up that line of communication between Gene and the math teachers to see what exactly is affecting the success of that math curriculum. The next question is we've got two more, I'm sorry. Is it fair for the superintendent to judge Sam on the basis of Gene's performance?
We had discussed we may not think it's fair, but that's the reality of it. When you become a principal or a supervisor, like that's your job, is to ensure that the people below you are doing what they're supposed to be doing and they're doing it effectively. And that ultimately reflects on how you're running your ship, that's our goal, is we want the students to be successful. And if they're not being successful, then that's a reflection on our teaching, which is a reflection on us as a leader, doing those check-ins, doing those walkthroughs to make sure that everything is up to the standard that you have set for the school.
And the last question is, it says that to role play the meeting between Sam and Gene using different strategies. And when we talked about it during our meeting a few a few weeks ago, a lot of us, all four of us just thought that whenever he approached him, he didn't have to say that his way was a problem, but he could say that, what he could start with asking the question of, what do you think the problem is, instead of just saying that his way of implementing it was the problem. And I think that's how we changed the conversation whenever we did it during our meeting. For the comments, some things to take away were that Sam didn't allow Gene to express his feelings. And then whenever you're a leader, you should be able to you're going to have to compromise, basically. You're going to have to negotiate, and you're going to have to be able to collaborate with people of different leadership styles. You also can't just assume that whenever you go onto a staff that you're going to be trusted and supported, because that's something that's going to have to be earned whenever you get there. You can't just assume, okay, I'm the principal, so they're going to work with me. You got to actually work with these people and let them see that you care about the school, so that they'll buy into what you are asking them to do. And the last thing was just to offer Sam, he could have offered Sam those collaborative strategies, hold meetings with the teachers and discuss what's not working with them, be more hands-on with them, and just make sure that he gets his feelings first before he starts giving the command and control, using the command and control approach. Because the way that he came across to Gene, he was very, it's my way or the highway, and you can't be that way as a principal. It's not going to be very successful for you. You do need to be stern, but you need to make sure that you're including the staff in your decision-making process.
Okay. Anybody else have anything to add? You brought out some really important points. When you are new to the staff, and most of the time the principals are the ones that are moved more so than the teachers. So if you're the new principal and you're moved to the school, there may be feelings that you were sent there for a reason, and so there could be some what's the right word? Some feelings that, okay, this person doesn't think we can do anything right. Well, that's not usually the way you feel when you go into a new school. You're trying to assess and figure out what is working well, what is not working well, and you want to fix it to try to get it to where it does work well. So you are right that you need to be very out and about. You need to be seen. You need to talk with your teachers. You need to talk with the staff, not just teachers, but also bus drivers and cafeteria workers, anybody who works in the school, because they all have an opinion about what's right and what's wrong with the school. So that's a really important piece. A lot of things also that you need to remember as a new principal. If your school has averaged having a principal every 2 years, a new one, then your teachers are more than likely not going to want to do what you ask them to, because they're of the mindset that, okay, this one's going to be gone too. And here we'll make a change for this one, and then they leave and somebody else comes in, they want us to do something else. And so, I think sometimes systems get in the habit of moving people whenever they start having issues in a school. Well, that's some people's leadership style. And sometimes boards of education are the ones behind it rather than the actual superintendent. But in all honesty, it's my opinion that if there's an issue at a school, and unless the principal wants to move to another school, that you're better off to assign your central office staff to work with that school to improve than you are to try to come up with a new principal. I actually saw, I think one of the schools, when I first started working in Yadkin County, I think one of the high schools had either 5 principals in 4 years or 4 principals in 5 years. And I can't remember exactly which one it was. I think there was 1 year where they didn't have a full-time principal for a little while. So I think it may have been 5 principals in 4 years. And it took forever for a principal to get that faculty's respect, because they kept thinking, okay, we've had so many new ones, why should we listen to anything they say? The other side of that is you then have a core of teachers that are so strong that people are listening to them, and it's really hard for the new person coming in. We recognized what was going on, and when we had a principal that was pretty strong there, we told them, we expect you to stay there for several years, and they did. And then because what had happened, we had a principal who wanted the job, and then he hadn't been in it a year to 2 years, and he wanted to go to the other high school. And I had the conversation with him. Now, if you want this job, you can have this job, but you've got to agree to stay there. We're not going to let this school get back the way it was 5 years ago. Well, when he wanted to transfer, he didn't particularly care for the fact that I wouldn't let him. But it was, sometimes you're looking for the benefit of the entire school, not what's best for an individual. And while this principal would have been good at either school, he committed a year previously. He wouldn't have been there but a year. And he had committed to a year previously that he would be there for a while. And so those teachers were counting on him. So you can have so much in and out that it makes it really hard on someone who does want to stay there. How many of you have observed this kind of situation where you had a really strong autocratic leader, and then you had more of a person who was laid back and they wanted to work with the faculty? How many of you have actually observed that or been caught in that kind of situation? Megan, who else? Crystal, Matthew, Scott? What happened in your situations when you saw that happening? It doesn't matter to me which one answers first.
In our situation, we had 3 principals in 4 years, and just some bad placements in all honesty. But there was so much initial. One came in, guns blazing, going to change everything. The other one came in really asking too many opinions and got too much input, and it was kind of a nightmare on both sides. So we've had this current principal for the past 3 years, and things have stabilized, and people know their expectations. People are very transparent from what to expect. So.
Okay. Matthew, Crystal, Megan?
I'm at a charter school, and it's a new charter school. It opened, this is our 6th year. And so I am like in shock, honestly, because this was my first job out of after graduating from Mount Olive. And we've only had 2 managing directors, which that's kind of like our principal per se, right? Because we're growing and we have middle school, we have elementary, middle, and high school now. He's more of our superintendent for all intents and purposes, but he's basically the one that, he tells us what to do. And so I've only worked for 2. So I was like, hearing everybody, I was like, I feel very blessed now. But our old managing director was very like, this is how it's going to be. He used to say it was a win-win or no deal, but really it was his win or no deal for you. And he was very authoritative, and this is how it's going to be, and that's just it. But Mr. Twitty is very, like, he wants our opinion. We're still going to do it the way he wants, but he wants our opinion, and he lets us kind of form the opinion, his opinion. And if something's not working, we can go to him and say, this is not working. Like, can we try it a different way? And he kind of, okay, well, give me, research it, that kind of stuff. And then let's see if it will work, that kind of thing. So
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Megan, Matthew?
Yeah, I gotcha. So a school that I was at previously, it was a high poverty school. About 75% of the kids were on free and reduced lunch. And the teachers who worked there were amazing teachers, really strong leaders, spread themselves very, very thin, were serving on different committees and trying their best to meet the needs, various needs, so many needs, and just very few resources to meet all the needs. So a new principal came in and everyone was just really excited about the possibilities of, you know, someone coming in to make procedural changes and necessary policy changes to try to make day-to-day life a little bit easier for the staff. So the meetings happened and the suggestions happened, and the collaboration was supposedly there, but then nothing happened with that administrator. He didn't listen to anything. He did everything the exact same way that he did it in a rural school, totally different population from what happened. And after his very first year there, about a third of the staff left. So really, really high turnover rate, just because he didn't get the buy-in. He didn't listen to his people, to the needs of the school.
Okay. Matthew?
Okay. I come from a school, basically, Davidson County. It seems like it's fairly common about every 3 to 4 years, regardless, there's a rotation of principals. But I guess when I started, the first principal was probably the longest during the time I was there. And basically, our school is a very tight community. The teachers were very close. I mean, bought into it. He gave us, a lot of, freedom to go in and teach the way we wanted and so forth. So we're very comfortable. He was followed again by another. She was a delegator, but she, again, very more of a transformational leadership style. But she was moved to the county office, and the one that came in behind her was more of the autocratic, demanding. And at that time, again, you could see the morale kind of fell, both with staff and students. So some of our performance did go down. Teachers started transferring and leaving, including myself. I left for 3 years until a new principal came back to that school, and I went back to the school after the new principal was hired. Again, there's been 2 since then, and both of them again have been more, realizing that, I don't know, it's kind of strange. This last one, whenever our previous principal last year was moved to the county office, for the first time, I think because we'd had such an issue in the past with the principal that had been brought in before her, we had a committee formed of teachers that we sat in on all the interviews and stuff with the potential candidates, and they put a little more emphasis on, asking us what we felt we needed, what we wanted. I'm moving forward, which was kind of nice. So I think we've got a pretty good leader in place right now. But it's, again, like I said, Davidson County is like a 3 to 4 year cycle, it seems like.
And a lot of superintendents have that belief, and they do move their principals around. Just a lot of it depends, and sometimes it's the board that's pushing the superintendent to do those things.
And I've talked to our superintendent. She was one of my principals and going through some of this change, and she mentioned the fact that they want them, not only are they moving on from high school to high school, but they're moving on from high school to elementary, or high school to middle school, and they're saying they're wanting them to differentiate and see different cultures, different schools. That way they can move up into higher positions in the county office. I don't know, but we do have a lot of turnover.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you gained from this particular case study and from your classmates the importance of being able to listen to your faculty, and also to realize that a principal does make a difference. And sometimes the difference is good, and sometimes the difference is not so good. So, you've got some good experiences and situations that you had mentioned that will help you as you move forward. All right, the last group is talking about when pupil achievement goes south, and that's something that nobody wants to hear. Sort of like Ron Rivera with the Panthers. It's gone south for the last 2 years, so he is now gone, I understand. So group 3.
Okay. Again, this was very similar to our last chapter that we did with the emphasis on test scores and No Child Left Behind. But you have Principal Earl Rusnak at a school that traditionally enjoyed success. However, there was a recognizable decline in test scores, and they had to come up with a plan to avoid the consequences of the poor performance. In assessing the situation, the SIT team come together, met, and the faculty representative gave the suggestion to teach to the test, and putting the focus more on teaching to the test. And then another faculty member said that they had good teachers, but they lacked the support of the community and parents to get the results they needed. Then they had a third staff member look at the emotional needs that teachers must respond to, and her argument is that tests don't measure the effort and caring that teacher provides to students in such situations. And then the fourth member of the staff said that it's a cycle that will correct itself over time, and he says that they're doing their best due to heavy turnover in staff, and it takes time to bring new staff up to speed. So he tries to offer reassurance to Rusnak. So basically, he's faced with the challenge of how to show improvement and how to address the concerns of his staff.
Okay, so our first discussion question was, how should Earl address the issues raised by the faculty representative? So we obviously started off by saying that it's clearly not a good idea to just teach to the test, because obviously there's much more skills that we're trying to give our students than just the knowledge that they need for their academic tests. We also stated that, you know, it's obvious that we're not a factory producing students that can just, you know, answer multiple choice questions on a test. And we would hope that we can teach them life skills to make them successful in the real world. And then based on the other comments, we pretty much just said that the principal needs to address those and kind of, you know, explain to the staff that obviously those are just excuses and they're just trying to rationalize. But he needs to be careful, obviously, how he states that to the staff. But just say that we no longer can, you know, blame parents because they're not involved in their students' education. And, you know, we can't just push it off to the future and say, like, it's totally going to be fine, we'll fix it in the future, no worries about that, because, you know, there are all these expectations for students to perform. Did either of you want to add to that? Sorry, Kayla, go ahead.
You want me just to jump in on question 2?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. The question 2 was, are there other ways to determine whether a school is doing a good job besides test results? So we, at this point, kind of talked about other extracurricular activities students could be involved in. Are the students buying into what's happening at school, or are they just kind of disengaged and have to be there? We talked about graduation rates, and not only that, but like, what are the students really involved in? Are they getting those internships that will turn into job opportunities after graduation? Are they going to college? Like, what's happening to them when they leave school? Also, teacher turnover. Are teachers staying there? What kind of teachers is the school kind of attracting? Or is there a lot of professional development going on? Are teachers growing? Or is it just kind of a stagnant place to be? And yeah.
All right. And then our third question is, what are some possible factors that might explain our poor achievement at Liberty Schools? So one of the factors that they talked about in the article was, or the case study, was that there's a lot of young and inexperienced teachers a lot of times at schools that have socioeconomic issues, just because is a lot of teacher turnover. And because of that, there's not that many mentor teachers that can be there for teachers for support. So we talked about how, you know, if there is a school that's lacking in mentor teachers, that maybe like the county office could step in and pair those teachers at that school with another school that might have more experienced teachers. And then we also talked about how it's important to give teachers PD so that they can, you know, improve on their skills as much as we can to help them so that they don't feel like they have to leave the classroom. And let's see. I think that was really it that we talked about with that question.
Okay, question 4, how can Liberty School effectively address these factors? So we talked about having highly qualified teachers and then providing support for new teachers, either like a beginning teacher kind of mentoring group or just checking in just to make sure that they're not too afraid to ask questions, but actually getting the support they need and feel like they have a place to go whenever they don't know. We talked about using research-based practices that will help not only increase learning, but teaching and how the curriculum is delivered. And we talked about if, for example, a school did not have enough teachers that have been teaching for at least 5 years, that we felt that the district should push in at that point and offer additional support to the school so that that body of teachers would have the support they need to get the PD and learning and mentoring off the ground. In regards to the comments, it kind of started out by talking about how this is a really debatable issue all over the country, and it pretty much just said that Earl needs to just tell the faculty that excuses and rationalizations are no longer going to be tolerated, and that it doesn't matter what the home life's like or what happened last year, like the job just has to get done, and that the demands of accountability that's placed on the school is what's going to keep that school open. Or ultimately, at the very beginning, it was talking about the entire faculty being transferred somewhere else. So he kind of faced with this problem like it has to happen. The comment said, you know, teaching to the test is not a strategy for success. This only creates like test factories, and that's all the students are able to do is answer those types of questions. It said that Earl needs to hire teachers who possess strong content knowledge, and they're willing and optimistic in regards to how they interact with the students and getting them excited to learn and grow. It also talks about having your most capable teachers placed in like the tested subjects versus somewhere else in the school, and revising the instructional program to have like extended blocks of time to kind of provide that remediation for students who are struggling, especially with literacy. Organizing PD for staff that really stresses curriculum, instruction, and best research-based practices to improve learning. All the staff should be included in the collaborative effort. So it's like that team building, everyone buying into what you and your school is trying to accomplish. And share with the staff research on achievement gaps that Earl had been looking at himself in regards to the variables that that school could actually control. For example, how rigorous their curriculum was being delivered in, how many teachers had at least 5 years experience, and then of those teachers, how many were certified, how many were prepared to be in whatever classroom or situation they were in at the school. One of the quotes that was in the comment section that kind of really stood out was, "The dirty little secret is that there are large numbers of unqualified individuals teaching, and they are disproportionately assigned to teach children of color and children from impoverished backgrounds." So it's like already knowing that those students are behind and not getting the same opportunity at home that some students have, then they are also often the students who are in schools that have less qualified teachers. And so it's just kind of like the problem gets bigger versus that gap getting closed. And it kind of ended with saying that whether teachers truly believe that the students can learn has a really strong influence on the students' performance. So if the teachers aren't really thinking that this is a goal the school can accomplish, then the students aren't really going to feel or believe that either. So you're not going to get that same effort And lastly, it kind of ended by saying no testing shouldn't be the only way we're looking at schools. And it listed several things like after school activities, how responsive the parent and communities were, communication, how learning was delivered. But ultimately, right now where we're at, that is kind of just like the sand in the line, the line in the sand, if you will, in regards to are we being effective in regards to conceptual understanding. So that's what we have.
Anything else? All right, you brought out some really good points, and I want to just add, you know, the teaching strategies, mentors, and professional developments are three of the keys that you've got to have when your school is not doing well. A lot of times, if a school has not done well and there is a consistent number of teachers there, they start being so hard on themselves that it becomes a self-perpetuating thing, and you have to turn it around by being the cheerleader and focusing on what is good and what you can do. So a lot of times you have to get them out of that mindset, and that's not going to happen in a year or so. It's going to take a while. A lot of the things that you mentioned go back to the old effective schools research that started this whole process for what you're dealing with No Child Left Behind and its various versions of it. If two of the tenets of effective schools research was time on task, the more that you spend on actual teaching, the more the children will learn, and you know that. The other part of that was that you as the teacher control when class starts and when class ends, not the bell. So we had a superintendent that expected us to teach from the minute the bell rang until we dismissed them at the time the bell rang the second time. He did not want to see anybody standing at the door waiting for the bell to ring 5 minutes before the end. Once in a while is okay if you have just given a test and you don't want to start a new subject matter, and that's, you know, more looking at high school and middle school that has a bell schedule. The other thing is that Kayla and them mentioned is, do you really believe all children can learn? And that was one of the basic tenets of the effective schools research. If you don't believe all children can learn, then it's going to show in everything that you do. Now, all children can learn. They may not learn the same way, in the same manner, or at the same amount of time. Some children require more time. Some children require different methods, but they can learn. They may not learn as much as what you want them to learn, but they can learn up to a basic skill. So you have to really believe that they can learn and that you as a teacher can make a difference. There are so many ways to measure a school and its progress. Part of it, you can look at the attendance rate. You can look at who checks in late and who checks out early. If they're not there for the instruction, things are not going to go well. So, you know, you do look at the test scores, but you look at a lot of other things to see if you can narrow down and find out exactly what the issue is. Because the issue is not going to be one thing, it's going to be a multiple of things that's going on. Another one of the issues that you mentioned, that the children that need the best teachers are usually in the high poverty schools. But what happens with teachers? Many times, by the time the high poverty schools get their enrollment numbers and they start to hire, the pool of good, solid teachers who've been around for a while is so limited. And so they have to take often the very young who are really good, but they need some help to get polished. And so, you know, those schools need to look at how can we grow everybody, including our staff. And so that's one of the things that you have to look at. Now, I know we're about out of time, and I want to share again to just introduce to you the next set of things that you're going to be working on. And your next professor will do this, but just to get you started and so you know what you're looking for. The AAPTEL is what you will do in the second semester. It is the Analysis and Action Plan for Teacher Empowerment and Leadership. And your first task is to look at best practices research, and then you develop a checklist. So the prompt is conduct a literature review with a bibliography. That's not saying an annotated bibliography. That is conduct the literature review. You know that a literature review is just a paper explaining everything, and the bibliography is all the references at the end. And you're looking at various teacher empowerment and leadership best practices. Now, don't forget that part of the leadership best practices is actually best practice teaching in the classroom. So that's part of it. And a lot of things, Marzano will have issues with information on that. So I'm giving you some tips to let you know where to go and look for some of this information. You're looking at building efficacy and empowerment among your staff. You're looking for results-oriented professional development, recruitment, placement, and mentoring of school staff, approaches to or for evaluation of school staff. And a lot of times the schools don't have much choice in this. It is decided by the state. And then teacher leadership and decision making. The decision making in the classroom is where you're looking for the best used strategies for teaching what you're teaching. Now, you're to create a checklist once you have gotten all that information in your first part. And what you're trying to do is come up with something that you can see when you go into a classroom and see what they're doing that helps you decide whether any of those areas are present in that classroom. So, and part of it could be things you could observe in the school as well. So how many teachers are actually taking leadership roles? What are they doing in the school? What committees are they in charge of? So this checklist should emphasize key observable demonstrations of best practices that you would expect to see in a successful 21st century school. As I've suggested all along, evaluators like to see the subheadings that match the descriptions in the prompts. I want to encourage you to pay more attention to what the prompt says and the tasks say and the rubric says than the example that they show you. The examples that they have picked for this course was not the best example, and it did not have some of the things in it the way it was supposed to have. Another thing, when they first were doing this, they wanted the first part, the narrative, to be 8 to 10 pages. If you're dealing with 5 different areas as you're being told to do, and you're trying to come up with a lit review, then can't do it in a paragraph for each one of them. And so it had been suggested 8 to 10 pages would take care of that. Now here's some authors at one time they wanted to make sure that you use. Todd Whitaker, Marzano, and Linda Darling Hammond. Now there's plenty of others that you can add, but those were some that they were looking for. Marzano had a lot of teaching strategies to look for in successful classrooms. And so that's a place to start. In your bibliography, you should have at least 5 in order for it to be considered proficient. It doesn't say that in the rubric, but I'm telling you some information that I got from when I was working with the evaluators. Don't forget that some of your checklists should focus on what you might observe in the classroom of an effective teacher. That is task 1. And task 2 is a gap analysis and a needs assessment. So what you're doing is you're going to collect data, and you're going to have criteria where you're going to identify the gaps between what you observed in your school and what research says are best practices. This is again where Marzano's successful teaching strategies will make your life so much easier if you incorporate that one into that fifth strategy or that fifth section. Gaps in the 5 areas should be addressed in narrative form using APA and referencing sources identified in the lit review when appropriate. And again, it's the same things. And then the second prompt is taking the information and you represent it graphically using charts, tables, graph. The visuals are to be used to illustrate and support the data analysis and conclusions that you expressed in your needs assessment based on your gap analysis. So that's just a brief introduction to let you know where you're headed and what you're looking at. This semester, this coming semester, is going to be teaching strategies. So, what's going on in your school as far as leadership strategies to help your school grow. So that's just a brief overview. Do you have any questions?
I have one, Dr. Todd.
Okay.
Is that task 1, 8 to 10 pages for just prompt 1, not included the checklist, or is that total? Or just suggested?
It's just suggested, and the checklist would be taken from that information.
Okay.
In other words, once you do a good job with the lit review, you've already got all the information you're going to need for your checklist. Then you just create the checklist based on the information from there.
Okay, thank you.
Did that clarify?
Mm-hmm.
All right, any other questions? Okay. I have thoroughly enjoyed working with you. I wish I could work with you, and maybe I will down the road. I think I've taught every class that is taught in this course, but most of the time they put me with 601 and sometimes 605. So maybe I'll see you again in 605, depending on what's happening down the road. But I have thoroughly enjoyed working with you, and I hope that you have gained information that will help you feel very competent as a leader. All right. If you need to
Thank you very much.
if you need to contact me for anything, feel free to do so. And also make sure if you've got a question and I haven't answered it quickly, send me an email and then I'll double check and see what's going on regarding any points that you don't find. All right? Well, I hope you have a wonderful end of this semester, and I hope you have a great Christmas. Enjoy your time at home whenever you are there. Good night.
Thank you, Dr. Todd. Good night.
Thank you.